I always advocate role playing. Role playing is when you are imagining how this question will land on a person and how he's going to answer that. That's when you will change it. That's when you will course correct. Stop worrying about this AI, this tech, and what's going to happen. Craft is also very creative. Surely use tech. Today we use so much of tech everywhere. Why do you get worried about it? I don't get worried. I'm very excited about all the new stuff that is happening. And if this avatar can help me do something, and if I can work along with that, why not? He said, no matter how much tech you use, how much all of that you use, there's a magic in the moment, and that is only a human can provide.
Welcome back to another insightful episode of the Collaborative Canvas, where we deep dive into stories, strategies, and industry expertise with thought leaders around the world. I'm your host, Ankesh Saxena, and today we are in a truly inspiring conversation which ignited, I think, a couple of months ago in a conference in Bangkok about when we are talking about by large AI and tech. Somebody actually came by and said, we should also look at the human-centric approach. So, ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is none other than Priya Lobo, a trailblazer in understanding human behavior and emotions and the connections to branding and business. Priya is not just a businesswoman, but a profound thinker whose insights bridge the gap between numbers and the narratives. With decades of experience, she has been shaping how organizations perceive consumer emotions and how these emotions impact brand strategies. In this episode, we will explore Priya's unique approach to blending psychology and market research, the evolving dynamics of emotional intelligence in today's fast paced business world, and how brands can build stronger connection by understanding the deeper layers of the human emotion. So, buckle up as we uncover powerful lessons and transformative ideas that you can apply to your own journey, whether you're a marketer, a researcher, or even an entrepreneur. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Priya.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Ankesh, for having me over.
It was very inspiring, Priya, when we spoke first about this in the conference, which was flooded with AI technologies and startups and all the tech evolutions which are happening in the market research space. And I think people were talking about human-centric approach. So let's talk about how we can redefine this entire research spectrum altogether.
So I think the human-centric approach is ultimately you're talking to a person. Whether you're designing a questionnaire or having a conversation, I think the most important thing is, are you keeping that person in mind when you are designing or structuring a conversation? And I think that's where the empathy comes in. And many times, even when I started my career and even now, I feel everything is so disconnected and detached. It looks almost robotic. And actually, there's a person behind it. And if you really want to understand emotions and you want to understand the context, then you need to take that trouble. You need to make sure that you're designing and structuring not only questions to get that deeper understanding. And how are you going to do that if you really don't keep that empathy in mind? And I always advocate role playing. Role playing is when you are imagining how this question will land on a person and how he's going to answer that. That's when you will change it. That's when you will course correct.
I generally do that. I speak to myself about how do I fit into this conversation before I actually go and ask the same question to somebody else. I may get a different perspective altogether.
Yeah.
But as a researcher, whether it is qual or quantitative, we structure the questionnaire based on that. That's always we talk about, that conversational approach. And most of those questionnaires actually miss them.
Yeah, because I don't think so. A questionnaire can have a conversational approach because the when you define a question, I think you also have an answer inbuilt in it. But if you left it a little unstructured, possibly you'll hit upon something very, very different. And because it's not cut and dry, it's not those 20 things that you wanted to, tick mark and answer. But if you go with the objective of saying these were the five, in our minds, we call it the five global objectives, okay, and five, not more than that. And then you go and go about answering those because those objectives you've thought about very, very clearly. And when you do that, you can explore anything, right? As long as you're able to answer those questions, and maybe there is a lot of hidden truths, and that is what research is about, right? To
I,
look for things that we cannot see.
Priya, you also mentioned when we were having this conversation in Bangkok for the SOMAR, you mentioned that, these questions are designed based on the, business objective altogether.
Yeah.
When it comes to business objective, we always say the questionnaire should be engaging, whether it is for the qualitative or the quantitative. And you mentioned about the
Yeah.
empathy part, feel the question the way it is. But, to get a comprehensive insight, what should be the right element for designing these questionnaires to know exactly that we are getting the human centric approach designed into it and we're getting the right insights out of it?
The most important step is, as I said, role playing, right? Once you've designed something, you do a mock in your team and see that if this is really being able, if somebody is able to answer it, if somebody is not able to answer it, then you're not going to go anywhere with that approach, right?
Makes
Now,
sense.
talking about engaging, just imagine if I call you up and I start asking you your age, where you work, how many children you have, and what you do. And I could have just started by saying, tell me a little bit about your life and moved on. We don't do that, right? We ask so many things before we actually start having that conversation. And that's where I think we're missing the point when we are talking about a human centric approach. And everything can be, I think, iterated and fine tuned. I think our industry is too lackadaisical about it. We don't want to, upset the apple cart, as I would say. Yeah.
So let's not upset the apple cart, but while saying that, I'm assuming there are quite a bit challenges and the barriers around it.
Yeah. I think the biggest barrier is lack of training because we have taken so much for granted when someone joins the industry. You're just told, follow the screener, follow this, follow that. You don't know what bad habits you've picked up. You don't even understand what a focus group discussion is or why am I doing a interview. Nobody's really sitting down and unraveling the basics. Once your basics and foundations are in place for the first 2, 3 years, I think you can be on the path of being a good researcher. It takes time.
It does. It does. There have been a lot of videos that you post, and it's very consumer-centric approach. I remember one of which you were talking about a city overall, and the approach towards how the city has been made up and
Yes.
how people are there. These observations, do people should inculcate these observations into their conversations to get a better approach?
No, I think what's important is for a researcher, the culture, food, the people, the market visits, all that is part of research. So if you go to Lucknow and you don't know what Lucknow is about, then people also sense that you really don't know. But if you take that trouble and you found out something about the city, you try to understand that and you try to understand it deeply from the person that you're meeting in Lucknow, I think that conversation is at a very different level. For example, in Lucknow, if I say Muskuraye Lucknow, that person also helps me understand why this phrase is so important. Same thing in Bangkok. I think I learned so much about the culture, and then when I keep observing, I said, yes, the entire country follows these culture codes. And I think that's so fascinating. And I think that enriches a researcher and enriches the work that you do.
This training thing that you just mentioned as well. A lot of organizations actually don't do these trainings, or they just employ people and put them on the work.
I think there is training, but I don't think so. We are really looking at things and how things are being done. For example, I might be vocal to say that if we outsource something to a moderator, 12 pages of a discussion guide, that's not a human centric approach. You're just going through the motions of doing something. And then, you also want speed, you want quickness, and you're asking those questions. You're going through the motion. Do you really think you are uncovering an insight? Will you uncover anything out of that? No.
So as a researcher, if I get an outsourced project like this, where I have to moderate, and considering that I have all those qualities to do that, and yet I'm not very much trained about it, what is that one big mistake that I'm gonna do, and how can I can overcome those?
So, what I would do is I would spend time with that person. I would do at least two briefings. I would brief you on the objective, I would brief you on the context, I would take you through the mind flow and wait for you to ask questions. I'll ask you to sleep over it for a day and then come back with your questions. And if you wanted to rehearse it with me, even before you step out and do your first interaction.
Which I'm sure a lot of organizations actually miss, because once they give the questionnaire out to the moderator, they believe he's or she's an experienced one. And because of the time issue, because we have to get the study done, we miss that entire impact.
Yes, and I think moderators are very, very busy even to come for a briefing sometimes. And they go through it and say, yeah, yeah, we got it, we got it. Those are the moderators that I would not work with, because we have to value the work that we do. So you got to take time out, and at least two briefings are a minimum, because ultimately it's your project. It's not about outsourcing and the moderator, right, Ankesh? At the end of it,
I
it is your project.
You're
Are you
right.
taking the responsibility for it,
Yeah,
right?
I remember. I mean, this one project I was part of, and the moderator who was interviewing the respondent and has a very, latent face, like no reactions, no emotions, nothing. It was like, there's a script and you're reading it through. There was no conversation. I remember my days with, earlier when I used to go with a pen and paper, and I was like, no, why am I asking these questions to them if there's zero context to it? Or even if I know there's an objective to, I understand why I'm asking this, but still, am I giving them the right kind of a questions to get the right kind of an answer, or do I need to just simply go and
I think a researcher should be given a little freedom to work around the flow as well. And often I have seen that if they don't go as per the flow, I'm talking about generally, I think then it's believed that you are not following the flow and not asking all the questions. A little room has to be given within a bucket of questions, right? To a little bit of wandering. A lot of my wandering has led me to become a good researcher and then into behavior and into what I have become today. But if I was not allowed that, I don't think so. I've been a part of this industry.
I think you've been doing a fantabulous job. The citation I gave, it was more like, if I am talking to somebody and if I'm not having a conversational approach, again, going back to
Yeah.
the first question,
Yeah.
I will not be able to extract the insights that I really need, whether it is for my own need or whether it is from the perspective of a company who's running this project. There's two different aspect to it again. So if I am seeking something, I'm seeking it for myself. I can have the different flow, I can go as I want. And that's exactly happened with me as well, because when I started conversation with someone, and then he realized that the first question doesn't match with the third question, the third question doesn't, but I know it's for me, so it doesn't matter. But business is a definite objective, and if we give them the flow, and again, without maybe out of the blue thought that two mock interviews didn't go well and we are now on the ground and doing it, what is that impact and how can we control it?
I think once you do your first interview, you need to control it from that first interview and see if you need to amend.
So you're
Right?
saying that you need to have your observations eye open every time.
Yes. Yes. Because you can make a change.
But Priya, when it comes to the pressure that organization levied on these researchers, they feel that pain to complete the interviews and the project on time. They don't worry about it,
So
which
it's
you
not on
mentioned.
the moderators. I say that the organization and the team lead has to take that responsibility. There'll be 20 people asking them 20 things.
Exactly, because the client is giving the project not to the moderator, to the company.
Yes.
And that's their brand value. They need to ensure that it goes
And
smooth.
that needs to be controlled. If that's not controlled, I think it is shitty output.
Yeah. And that first human-centric approach actually comes from the training model or the module that which is given to the moderators. Because if we are not humanly attached with them, we're not talking about, what is your problem? Can you do that? How many interviews you can do that? They will not be in a phase to, go
Yeah.
and they're doing the same thing in the field as well.
Correct. And people are in a rush because I think sometimes they're doing 3 to 4 interviews and sometimes it's just at a stretch. And then you just go to the motions, right? Because you are actually using a lot of energy. I teach all the people that who work with me that you need to have energy. If I'm talking to you and I have no emotions, and I'm just talking to you. Why will you tell me about your life? Why will you engage with me? Why will you sit with me for 10 minutes?
That's right. And something that I'm actually going out of my question script, which I gave to Priya, because a lot of conversations that ignited just now were the experiences that we have, on the floor or on in the field. And Priya is able to answer each one of them. I mean, we were not prepared for a couple of other questions, which I just bounced on to her out of the blue. But the fact is, Priya, I mean, I think these challenges or barriers are the biggest roadblock for any organization. I mean, we just spoke about a couple of them. And even if you talk about the qualitative for the moderator part or in the quantitative where the questioners are being designed, that pain area still is there, and nobody is actually working on it at this point of time.
See, it just won't go away, right? But I think if one puts attention to it, it's possible. At a very organizational level, what is the one thing that will happen when you don't do it properly? You lose your client.
Yes,
He'll go to somebody else.
exactly.
Or in many cases, I would rather clients come and tell me that what's happened and we course correct. Unless you're doing that, you start to lose a client for sure.
People are more relying on the new age technology to overcome those, rather than sending the moderators. They'd go with eye tracking studies or face tracking studies or even online FGDs. And I think what I've been hearing that the AI avatars are being created for those. So you don't even have to worry about the empathy, I guess. You don't have to worry about the questionnaire length. You just have to put the question out there, and AI would, in a very straightforward voice, would ask those questions and would get it done.
I attended this brand summit and Piyush Pandey came he gave a talk. And actually he said, stop worrying about this AI, this tech and what's going to happen. I think our craft is also very creative. Surely use tech. Today we use so much of tech everywhere. Why do you get worried about it? Don't get worried. I'm very excited about all the new stuff that is happening and we can use in research and how it could take out some of the grunt work. However, he said something which stuck a chord with me. He said, no matter how much tech you use, how much all of that you use, there's a magic in the moment, and that is only a human can provide. And that's true. And I am more than happy if something reduces my work by 3 hours. But ultimately, if I can add that magic, my experience, my wisdom, that's the magic that the anybody looks at, right? And that's what somebody wants to partner with you.
I mean, see, that's exactly how I do it. I mean, most of my work, I use the technology, but I don't overpass the technology on me. That I really have to, just copyright it. This is what it is, and this is how I want it to do. I don't do that. I probably take the extractions out of it, do my approach into it, which I can probably say, it's my human approach, and then I give it back to to the client and tell them that this is what it is. I mean, I think that's one good example I can cite, that most of those secondary research, it's already there. You have the data, somebody have actually worked on it, but now you got chat gpt.
You'd have to go to reams of stuff. Like in college, I'm thinking if I had something like that, wow.
Yeah.
I would then just look at it, apply my mind, and I would then use my mind to say, okay, what is my perspective on it? And I think that's a brilliant thing. Aren't we supposed to have perspectives?
Of course.
Point of view on thing. I don't love it if tech can help me with a whole lot of grunt work that I did when I started off with.
Yeah.
And why not?
I used to go with the pen and paper and take the interviews of the respondent onto the field. And then when I submit that paper to the supervisor and he give it to the analyst, every single pen and noted on that paper needs to be put down somewhere. And I have no clue what exactly happened and how come those analysis came out. But now it is so easy, you just have everything there. We call it synthetic data. That's again, coming up. People are using secondary research to write reports through chat gpt. They don't even have to worry about anything else. I think that's an overall organization, I would probably say industry wide trend. People are using the technology at its helm, but
I think it will evolve, and I think it's a very exciting phase. We don't know what will work out, what will not work out, and I think that's what evolution is about.
it is.
And I believe that if we are about perspectives, It'll help us hone perspectives better if I get all the reams of data at one place. And it's like a massive library, right? And
Couldn't
I'll give you
disagree.
another advantage of this tech thing.
Yeah.
What stops you from doing many projects? You were talking about burnout. Why not? If tech can help you with some of the things that you feel is taking a lot of time, why not? I think you can do a lot more work
Yeah.
and you can do a lot more interesting work.
I think the biggest thing which I have learned, Priya, is you learn from your own mistakes, and then you really need to know when are that those mistakes are happening. If you just do it like a robot, then you probably be ending up onto the same railroad where you're just going on and there's no turns and there's no you'll probably get bored or you'll be thrown out. So I think as a person myself, and that's exactly what I would ask everybody, evolve yourself. As things are evolving, you also have to evolve. You cannot just be a stereotype in the game. So I think thank you so much for enlightening us on this, and there's a lot to cover about, because I think we probably have to talk more about those behavioral science that you probably been working on probably some other time, and those emotional intelligence that coming up where
Sure.
technology is cannot win. You probably can inculcate everything into it, but again there's always new thing which is happening around, and then you have to be ready for that. You cannot train AI almost every time. That's an ongoing process.
I think we have to be constantly blending, right? And the more you learn to blend, the more you learn to embrace new things. I think you stop worrying about, whether this is going to take your job or is this going to, destroy what you're doing. I think it's not a forward-looking approach,
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. I think two things, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm taking from this podcast is, one is that, you have to learn from your own mistakes. You really have to observe what you're doing, because the game starts from there itself. Once you know exactly how you're answering those mock interviews, how you're performing in those mock interviews, only then you can go and talk to any human being on how you can bring your empathy into that conversation. And I would probably rather go with the second one, because I love doing conversations, and it ignites a lot of questions which always could be out of your script. So that's always a learning curve, and that's where we bring this to an end of this illuminating conversation with Priya Lobo. And I hope that you found today's discussion as fascinating and thought-provoking as I did, because I love, talking to Priya, the human-centric approach in the game of market research. I always say it's a game because you play the things by your own way. You're not being dictated to do that, unless and until you are. Then of course you are a robot, and you probably have to change the way you see the overall business that you're doing. So Priya's insight remind us, that the real power of any brand lies in the ability to connect with the human emotions. And I mentioned we will have many more discussions with Priya about the emotional intelligence and the behavioral science, because that's a very in-depth kind of a knowledge that everybody needs to have. And again, if you're inspired by what you just heard today, don't forget to share this episode with your network and join the conversations in the comments. I love to hear what you think about this product podcast, and let us know what stood out to you. Thank you, Priya, so much for coming all the way from Mumbai. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And be sure to subscribe to the Collaborative Canvas on Spotify and YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So, forthcoming are Apple and Amazon, but that's going to take some time. But until next time, keep learning, keep curious, and let's keep collaborating to create something extraordinary. See you in the next episode.